The key, I think, for all of us is the passion, the love for music, and the commitment to excellence. That commitment to excellence comes with a responsibility that your focus is to make the music and the people that you're making music with better, to support them in that.
Ed, thanks so much for coming by here.
Thank you.
Your playing is so inspiring. I've heard several sessions that you've done and recordings that you've done, and even in New York, where I'm from, your name has made its way up to New York.
I think I robbed the post office.
No, not necessarily. It's in the highest level of respect of musicians. But also, you're kind of like a missing link, Ed, because you really kind of connected some of this past historical legends, from the Sinatras to what's happening now. You really are at the cusp of this middle connection.
Yes.
That now what comes with that is another level of responsibility.
Yes.
To have to capture this and notate this into book form. So you've got some serious tasks ahead of you as you go on.
I have some homework to do. I guess now that I'm done with the doctorate, I can work on that. But because that was a lot of writing. As Arturo Sandoval would say, we some of us speak English with barriers. So I always worry about that stuff. But I do have to get it notated, because it is a responsibility. I've been very blessed to be a part of this musical family.
It is, but you know what's happening, and you get it. I think you really, really get it. But let's go back to the beginning. You're such a great player. You have such great musical expression. You have such great empathy and compassion when you play. You're so sensitive to the music at such a high level. Where do you think all of this came from? What happened at the beginning?
First of all, I don't think I'm very good. The humility thing, I grew up very poor. I always tell people I've lived three lives. I grew up in Venezuela. Venezuela was a very nice country.
Yeah.
My mom took us to spend some time with our grandparents in Spain, and I lived in San Sebastian. Little apartment. My grandmother had 12 kids. She was Russian, Jewish, Spaniard. You couldn't be a Jew back then, so she, with hair down to her on the floor. Wow. And if we were going to have chicken, which we had very rarely, she would have to kill it in the kitchen. We didn't have a refrigerator. They would put the milk out on the windowsill. I grew up with the coal and the bar, that kind of thing, and ate a lot of white beans and a lot of bread. So humility was a part of it. My mother lived during that whole Spanish Civil War and all of the terrible times in Europe. And she told me, she would say, if it wasn't for the Americans, I think a lot of us would have starved to death. She had to stand in line. She was the baby and would walk for hours to get bread. And so I've had a very humble life in that respect. I came to America. When I first got here, I thought Miami was backwards compared to Venezuela, because Caracas was a big city.
Yeah.
My next door neighbor was an alligator. So I said to my father, "What's up?" And he said, "Just give it a little time, you'll see." And I went to school, and the humanity of the people was unbelievable. I mean, here was a kid I didn't speak English, and they accepted me as one of theirs. My third grade teacher, I came in third grade, and she talked to me, and I went, and she just went like this, like, "You're on your own, kid." And less than a year later, I was speaking English, and I was accepted as part of the family. And I had a junior high band director, Charles Foster, and Vince Ricci was my orchestra director. Charles Foster was on the Midway when it sank. This was the nicest man. He was my band director. I had a connection with the saxophone. I don't know. I come from a family where if your father said sneeze, you sneeze, even if you. They gave me a note, and I gave it to my dad, and he said, "Hey, would you like to play in band?" I was like, "Well, I don't know. I wanted to play ball."
Yeah.
Thank God I didn't. But what instrument do you like? I don't know. How about the saxophone? Okay. And the next thing I know, I'm in the band playing the saxophone. And from the very first day, even though the first day I played with my mouthpiece upside down, while all the saxophone players laughed, about 3 days later, Charles Foster looked at me and he said, "What's wrong with you? Why is your mouthpiece upside down?" I'm like, "They told me to put it like this." It's like, "No, don't do that." And so I flipped it over, and the next day I was first chair. But I had a connection with that thing, and it was great, because I've always been, today I'm very talkative, but I've always been shy, because I've always been a little heavy and not. I wanted to be an international sex symbol, but I didn't have those looks. So when you're like that, and I've always been a nerd. I'm a math guy and a books guy, so I love that. And the saxophone gave me a voice that I wouldn't have had otherwise. It allowed me to speak to the world without ever having to say anything.
Interesting.
And that was a gift. And my band director, I guess because of the math or whatever, I could read anything. I would get bored very easily and start playing everybody else's parts, You talk about the music. I've always known from the time I started playing, I always knew, even though I hadn't studied theory or any of that, but I knew what note I was playing in relation to the chord that was sounding at that moment in the band. So if I was in a symphonic band and I was playing a B, and I knew that that chord was a G, I knew I was playing the third, and that note wanted to be a little higher than a... There was just something that was in my system. My father was a concert pianist, my mother sang a lot. I always had that affinity, and I have such a love for music and such a respect, a fear of music, and a respect for the people that have allowed me the opportunity to make music with them. From the time that I was a kid in junior high school to this day, I adore and revere those people almost in a way that's silly. Michael Brecker once signed an autograph for me, and he said, "Ed, this is silly, Michael." And to me, it wasn't silly because he was my hero.
Yeah.
But you know, you get to work with Phil Ramone and Tom Dow and Emilio Estefan and Gloria Estefan and Juan Luis Guerra and I mean the list, it doesn't end.
Oh, the list is incredible. When I look down,
it's insane.
You've got Tito Puente, you've got the Bee Gees, Shakira, Smokey Robinson, Temptations, Lenny Kravitz, Gloria Estefan, Julio Iglesias. This list is almost too much to talk about.
Well, and when you're sitting in a chair like this, working with Lenny Kravitz, and he's singing a line to you and said, "Hey, let's do this." And I think of Lenny Kravitz as, you know, this is when you talk about a legend, but it's musically, from a musician standpoint. I just sort of bow to people like that. I always feel inferior to them, whether I am or not. That's different, but that's how I feel. You know, I hang out with Arturo Sandoval. If you give Arturo Sandoval a banana, music's gonna come out of it.
Absolutely.
That guy. I say there are two people that have an S on their chest: Superman and Sandoval. You know, you work with people like that. I have such respect and admiration for them, and not only for them, but for all the people who have influenced me. We were talking before about Chicago, Earth, Wind, and Fire. You know, Don Myrick. I mean, that solo on Reasons is as good as it gets. The Phil Wood solo on Billy Joel tune. Michael's solo on Native New Yorker. Because I was a kid, just like everybody else. I was listening to Frampton and Chicago and Earth, Wind, and Fire. I love those people. I love Kiss. You know, Barbra Streisand to me, Walks on Water. There are probably two people that I haven't made music with. That Streisand is one, and the other one is Sting, who I just love. But I never ask. I don't go where I'm not wanted, or I don't go where I'm not invited. And I would never ask somebody, unlike when we were watching the Jocko movie last night, you know, Jocko would go up to Zawinul and say, "I'm the greatest bass player in the world." I'm like, I'm just some kid from Venezuela that's learning the saxophone. You know?
Well, so, I love that level of humility, but it really is, you're a heck of a lot deeper than you tend to say, just so you know, okay? Just so you know. Let's go back to, like, you're a young kid, you're in your teens, and you're starting to play with certain bands around here, but you're the youngest one in the band at the time.
Always. I was always probably 30 years younger than everybody else in the band.
Incredible.
My first experience with my band director, Chuck Foster, and I want to say something about Charles and Vince. My sister was really the musician in the family. My sister Melina is an incredible clarinetist. And in fact, Juilliard had called to give her a scholarship before she had even graduated high school.
Incredible.
That's how good she was. But we were very poor. All of a sudden, she gets a scholarship for private lessons in the 9th grade. And I find out after I graduated high school that it was Charles Foster who paid for those lessons.
How incredible.
It's the kind of person he was.
Incredible.
How do you say thank you for that? And how do you not realize that maybe somebody's watching over you and opening your doors for you? I was in the 9th grade. I skipped the 8th grade because I'm really good at math, and I kind of did all the math homework in a weekend. And so the principal called me in and said, "We have to move you. You're in 7th grade now. Effective today, you're in the 8th grade." So I skipped. I literally went from 7 to 9. But I played a solo. I played Misty and a solo, and I played the only time my father ever heard me play. When I finished, everybody stood up, and I got scared. And so I started to tear up. I started to cry because I thought I'd done something wrong. And Mr. Foster said to me, he said, no. When that happens, that's really good. And I had no idea. And so I always had that kind of a voice of my own from there. And because I could read anything, people would call me. And I could improvise and all that kind of stuff. So I started playing with people who were 25, 30, 35. A guy, John Florio, would call me, and next thing I know, I'm playing in 4 or 5 bands. And I started recording with the great Fajardo, the great flute player. His son, who was an electrical engineer by trade, was a great bass player, great songwriter. I was like 14 years old recording not only the saxophone, but I'd record, like, I played trumpet, I played mellophone, I played flutes, and so there are all these tapes floating out there of me when I was like 14, 15 years old.
Unbelievable.
I was very fortunate. I got a lot of experience doing that stuff. and was always kind of asked to play a solo and that kind of thing. And one thing led to another, and I got, when I went to college, I had no idea. You know how most people apply for colleges and stuff? I didn't do any of it. I wanted to go to the University of Miami. I had never practiced a day in my life. I didn't practice ever until I was 19. Never practiced a day in my life, never took a private lesson, just played in band. I show up to Miami, to the University of Miami for the audition. I didn't even have a read. My saxophone, I'd never seen the inside of my house. I show up there, I go into the practice room, I get a readout, I put it on, I go to play. You know, I do the audition and all that kind of stuff, and I could see a couple of the professors kind of chuckling a little bit. And Gary Lindsay, who's a brilliant arranger and a legend, and my friend and my teacher, was my auditioning guy. And so they take me in a room and they make me improvise. Look, I come from Venezuela. I grew up listening to zarzuelas. I don't know about jazz. The first time I heard Coltrane, I was a senior in high school and I thought he was crazy. You know, Charlie Parker was like, what's that? I had never heard that stuff. I had heard Mantovani and with strings. My father was very serious and like kind of like, you know, elevator music and classical music. I heard a lot of that. And a lot of Venezuelan folkloric music. I go to sight read. And Gary puts out these books, and I sight read it, and he looks at me kind of weird, and he's like, have you ever played this before? No. Pulls out another book. Have you ever played this before? No. And I have a temper. You know, I'm very humble, but I also, like, don't waste my time. So he asked me the third time, I'm like, no. Do you want me to play it in a different key? And he's like, what? I said, yeah. You want me to transpose it? Because in junior high, I used to get bored, so the band director, Charles, Chuck Foster, would send me all over the band to play whatever instrument wasn't being covered that day.
That's hysterical.
So I'd play the bassoon part one day, you know, so I'm reading bass clef, alto clef, whatever it is, no problem. So I do that, and he's like, so now I'm getting mad. So he pulls out another one. So you want a different key? Yeah. Except I played it twice as fast in a different key. So he said, wait a minute. So he goes in the room and he talks to Whit Seidner, who was a head of the program. He said, look, we got this kid in here. He doesn't know anything about improvisation, but he's weird because he just did this. And Whit looked at him and said, as I was told, he said, let him in the program. I didn't prepare for college. I don't even remember filling out the thing, you know, where you want to go. I just went there for the audition. They let me in, and they let me in as a music ed major. Fortunately, Whit stood up for me, allowed me to take his improv class, and my life changed. And Gary Lindsay, that first summer that I was there, I had been through a year of being a music ed major, which I didn't want to do. Though I spent a lot of time helping kids and all that stuff, but I didn't want to be a band director. I wanted to learn how to play the saxophone, because you can't teach people what you don't know how to do. I think. I probably had some teachers. Had a lot of great teachers. Gary Lindsay played me a tape of Michael Brecker and David Reutzstein, who lives in California, who's a great musician, playing a duet at the Montreux Jazz Festival. And that day was the day that changed my life. From that day on, I was in a practice room literally 14 hours a day.
What did you hear in Brecker's playing?
There was this emotion, there was this ability to sing that I hadn't heard before. He could play a note and it had a sense of weight like a singer that I hadn't heard in Coltrane, I hadn't heard in Charlie Parker. Was never that note that would just sit and sing with this vibrato that was voice-like. And then harmonically, there was such a, mathematically speaking, because my brain thinks that way, to me, I could just see the shapes. I could see the angles and the lines and the parallels and just this geometric world that I was fascinated by. The same thing happens with me with Debussy, you know, or Aaron Copland. It just changed my life. I had never heard the saxophone played like that, especially in a duo situation. So I locked myself in a room for many, many years. I still do that now. And Whit would always tell people, he said, yeah, when Ed was in school here, he said the first thing you would hear would be his saxophone when you came, and the last thing you would hear when you left was his saxophone. Because I have a lot of work to do. You know, unfortunately, Coltrane, Charlie Parker, Sonny Rollins, Sonny Stitt, King Curtis, Michael Brecker, they all wore an neck strap. Any of us that put a neck strap on like that, Tom Scott, any of us that put on a neck strap like that, man, you got a lot of nerve, because those guys have a neck strap, and they really play the saxophone. So for some little kid from Venezuela, that's a big responsibility. It's been the greatest blessing in my life, really, to look for my voice. And I've had the unbelievable good fortune of, you know, I don't know, 20 years old, and I'm the guy in charge of a recording session where Calle is the bass player. And so here's Calle and my good friend Flaco Padron, who's a great conga player. And I'm just, you know, I don't know the story about Calle because I'm not Cuban. I'm from Venezuela. You know? I know a lot about maracas, but I don't know anything. So Cachal's playing the bass, and it's time to do the paperwork. and they got to do the W2 forms. And Calle has a great sense of humor. God bless him. I just love him. I've been in rooms and worked with people like this. Sandoval, the first time Sandoval comes here in 1980 from Cuba, 1990.
Yeah.
My memory's terrible. I remember all things that are important to me at that moment, especially like where the food is. But my memory's a lot like RAM. You know, it's like if I don't need it, it's gone. So we go to this place called Midiland, and my friend Arturo Martinez, who's a legend in music, he and Rudy Perez really revolutionized Latin music production.
Yeah.
The sound of Latin music. Before that, it was a sound that we knew with Julio and Diego and who I've worked with, all those guys. But they really changed that sound, the Ricky Martin, that whole thing. And so he said, look, I asked my friend Arturo to come and play. I'm like, he said, you know Arturo Sandoval? I said, I don't know him. I said, but I know he plays with Calle and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so he comes, I'm always late at the studio. Ask Trevor, he'll tell you. There's Ed Calle time and then there's everybody else. Because I don't want to be here while they're getting the mics ready. Also because I'm Venezuelan and we're always late. That's why we're a mess over there. But that's one of the reasons I didn't move to LA, because they like you to be on time. I was born a little behind. But so I come in and they put me in this little cubicle and I don't see, and he's going to be over here and we have this wall. And I'm like, he comes in, I'm like, look, for all I know, he's going to be an egomaniac. I'm not going to stand up. I'm not going to say hi. I'm not going to kiss his butt. Yeah. But I am going to do one thing. Whatever they put in front of me, I'm going to play it, and there's not going to be a mistake. Yeah. And Edito writes really hard stuff, and he put out this thing, and it was hard. Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of notes, and what you would expect Calle and Sandoval to record now, but so we never met. He comes in, doesn't say hello, sits down. I'm like, yeah, okay, man, you're a legend. You come from Cuba, and you're great. But Ahmed Calle, I don't really care. So we play the part, and I swear to you, and Edito will tell you the story. We played it from top to bottom, and it just was perfect. I go to stand up because I couldn't believe that a trumpet player could play those things. And I played with some of the best. Yeah. But this guy is ridiculous. Yeah, yeah. So we both stand up like this, and there's a barrier, one of those. And he reaches over, and he says, you and I are going to be best friends all of our lives. And it's been exactly that way. Beautiful. That's how I met Arturo Sandoval. That's my life. Yeah. I mean, I'm so lucky that way. But
lucky, the interesting word lucky. The harder you work, the luckier you get. You've put your dues in for sure.
Yeah, we're all putting dues still. Yeah.
Absolutely, and until we meet our maker,
exactly
hopefully
right.
It'll be at that level. Exactly right. But what's the key thing about it is that because of your age of where you were, here you are working with musicians that are much older than you, so you had the chance to have the taste of the older school.
Yes.
So tell me some of the stories about some of those people that you were playing with.
Well, I remember Peter Graves, who you've talked with, who's in Miami. If there's a Roman pillar, there's a set of Roman pillars. There's Whitsidner. There's Mike Lewis, and Peter is just a guy who was there. He was there with Jaco when Jaco was writing those songs. Absolutely. And Jaco would play them for him, and he'd be listening to the bass. Like the neck of the bass would be in Peter's ear like this, and Jaco would say, "What do you think of this song?" These are the kind of people I've grown up with, or who helped me grow up. So I'm sitting on a bandstand, and we're playing for Sinatra, and I'm like 40 years younger than everybody else, and I've got people around me, Neil Bonsani and Dan Bonsani and Whitsidner and Peter Graves, and guys who are no longer here, who are legendary trumpet players and trombone players, and I'm this young guy, and they're like, yeah, man, like, yeah, when you play that, like, let's lay back a little bit here. Or I've always been very sensitive to vibratos and time. And my job is to make the thing better. My job is it's not about me. It's never going to be about me. Nice. I don't care if you're the soloist. Nice. It's always about the music. Nice. And in terms of a recording studio, it's always about the artist that you're there to serve. Right. So if the artist says to me, stand on your head, and that's what I need to do. Right. And sometimes they're going to ask you to do things that are very left-handed that they're right. It's their music, and they've got it. They understand. Yeah, yeah. So I've had those kinds of experiences with a lot of the older guys, and whether it's Calle, Celia Cruz, or Pedro, her husband, working with them, Gloria and Emilio. We were all kids when we started growing up that way. But I'll give you one. I was doing something for Neris. I had to play a little trio or quartet thing, some bossa nova, some quiet music. Yeah. And I'm playing. And I had been very fortunate. Tom Dowd, God rest his soul, and Phil Ramon, God rest his soul. But Tom had called me to play on Eddie Money's record. I was very young. Yeah. And I go in, and I knew who Tom Dowd was because I had read the liner notes of Coltrane's Giant Steps, and he was the engineer.
What great information, those liner notes of what,
yes.
That was our Google.
Something that we're missing now.
That was our internet. Yeah, exactly right.
And we were all like going to the record store and reading them all and memorizing stuff.
Absolutely.
And they, you're talking about the holy grail of music. And so I'm looking at Tom Dowd. And I also, because I'm a math and physics guy, and I like things that go boom, I knew that he had worked on the Manhattan Project.
Oh, interesting.
So we're over in E, in this same building, over in E, and I'm working with Eddie Money. And, I know who Eddie Money is because I've heard him on the radio.
Yeah.
And I walk in, and Tom Dowd is there, and I meet him. And I knew he was a legend, but I didn't realize how heavy it was.
Yeah.
And Tom Dowd says to me, he says, hey, you know the King Curtis thing, the growl thing? I'm like, you mean like this? And I do it, and he smiles. I'm like, he says, yeah, that. So I play the solos, and Eddie was a saxophone player.
Really
rest
nice.
in peace, Eddie.
Yeah.
Really nice person.
Yeah.
So I'm in a room full of legends, and I'm a young guy, and we're sitting at the board listening to the solo back, and they're all thrilled. And Tom says to me, he says, it's great. And he said, it reminds me of, and he starts talking about that stuff. I said, well, tell me about the Coltrane date with Giant Steps. Yeah. And he starts telling me. And now the room stops.
Yeah.
And now here's Tom Dowd giving this little guy, this Ed Calle guy, I was never little, but I was young, I had hair, giving me a lesson about recording the Giant Steps record.
Huge.
And then I said to him, well, what about the Manhattan Project? And he goes, how do you know about that? I said, well, I like math. And he told me, he said, yeah, I was there during all the tests and all the stuff. And he said, I lost a lot of my hearing in the upper range. So when I mix, I have to compensate for it.
Oh, is that interesting?
Not many people on earth have that opportunity to talk to someone like that who recorded. So here I am in a room with Eddie Money, who's a rock legend, the guy who recorded Coltrane.
Yeah.
So I can feel Coltrane in the room, and he's like, hey, Fatso, practice. But, and I've got Tom telling me that stuff. So years later, I'm playing for this thing for Naris.
Amazing.
And I'm playing the girl from Ipanema or some and I got my eyes closed because I always close and I don't want to get distracted. Plus, I want to think about all the... I open my eyes, and at my bell, literally this far away, it's Phil Ramone and Tom Dowd, like this. And right then, your heart stops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
like exactly what happened when I went to record with the Bee Gees. I had recorded with the guys separately. I hadn't recorded with Barry, but I had recorded with the guys separately, and I show up at Middle Ear, and there's the three of them sitting there. And I never get nervous, because that's why you practice, and also what's there to be nervous about?
Yeah.
And so I walk in, and I said, I never get nervous, but I feel like I'm at Mount Rushmore. It's the Bee Gees, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Like how many times have I heard that record and how these guys are geniuses. Everything, every song they write, it's just ridiculous. And I'm in this room with those guys playing a solo on their record. I'm like, so Phil and Tom are there, and they're just smiling because they're like, wow, you can do like the Stan Getz thing too. I'm like, well, it's my job. And that's one thing about Miami, and I think Peter, they talked about it the other night at the Jocko thing that we were doing, but Miami is a very unique place in the sense that our identity is every identity. We're not jazz purists, we're not rock purists, we're Jimmy Buffett, and we're the Allman Brothers, and we're Sam and Dave, and when you grow up here, you learn to love all the music, and you learn to respect it all, and you learn to play it all. So in that respect, when I go to New York and I meet the Jazz Police, I just laugh. I blow it off because it doesn't pertain to me. I'm like, hey man, I'm from Venezuela. I could care less about the Jazz Police. Go away. I'm not interested because we can't do that. Because I have as much reverence for Cachao and Celia as I do for Coltrane and Bird as I do for Peter Frampton. So I'm here at the studio. I'm in Studio A we're at Criterion at the Hit Factory. But I'm in Studio A recording, and the engineer Eric Schilling doing something with Eric Schilling, and it's about 2 in the afternoon, something like that. The assistant comes in, says something to Eric, and Eric says, "Hey Ed, there's a phone call for you." I said, "Well, we're in the middle of recording. Can they call back?" He said, "It's Phil Ramone." So I pick up. I'm like, I think I better take it. It's like, yeah. So I run out, and I go out to the lobby, and I pick up the phone, and it's Phil. "Hey Ed, it's Phil." Hi Phil, how are you? He said, "Hey, what are you doing today at 4? I'm like, "Whatever you need." He said, "I need you to do a solo for Frank." I'm like, "Frank?" He's like, "Yeah." "That Frank?" "Yeah." Okay. So I finish here and I go down to Emilio's place. And there's, you know, Phil and a bunch of guys in the room, and it's a track with Sinatra and Jobim, Fly Me to the Moon.
Oh, beautiful.
They want a solo.
Beautiful.
So Phil says to me, and you and I were talking before, you were telling me about the big bands. You know, Phil grew up with the big bands.
Yeah, big
so
time,
he's telling me the whole story about all that stuff. Got to go in and record. He's like, you know the Stan Getz thing. I'm saying, yeah. He said, I want you to play like you, but you know that vibe. I'm like, yeah, because I'm never going to play like Stan. I'm going to play like me because I don't want to insult him. And you know. So he's in there, and I record a take, and he comes on the speaker, and he says, yeah, can you do another one, and can you lay it way back? I'm like getting nervous because now I'm feeling like maybe I'm playing Latin time instead of.
Yeah. I'm
like, yeah, okay. So I play another take. Comes back in, I see them talking, and come back in, and can you play another one on top? Like, oh my God, I'm flunking. It's never happened to me, so I do it. And so when I finished that take, I said, hey, is everything okay? Are you guys happy? You know? And Phil comes back in, he says, oh yeah, no, we're keeping the first one. I just wanted to show him that you could do that. That's my life, is dealing with the biggest, like the legends of music, and I'm always been the kid. Now I'm old enough to have a picture with Moses when he was parting the Red Sea. But I've been the kid who has had literally the hands of God.
Incredible.
Passed down, like tap you on the shoulder and say it's okay.
Incredible.
Chick, I'll give you one.
Yeah.
We go to New York. Arturo calls me to sight read the music for Flight to Freedom at Middyland because Concord wanted to hear the music. So I go in to sight read all the stuff. There's Carl Griffin and all the people, and Arturo and I are playing the stuff, and I play all the parts and the solos and stuff. And I see Arturo and Carl talking, and they're laughing. And I'm like, what did I do now? So Carl comes and says, can you come in for a minute? Yeah, sure. So he says, hey, we were going to have so-and-so play on the record, but would you come to New York and do this record? Well, I said, yeah, be thrilled. He said, by the way, it's going to be Dave Weckl, Chick Corea, Anthony Jackson, Arturo, Ayrto, Mike Orda, may he rest in peace, and you, and I forget who else it was, Renee Toledo and a couple other guys.
Beautiful.
Like, yeah. What he didn't know is that I had come off the Julio tour year before, and I had gone and studied math almost full time just for fun. I was in the middle of advanced calculus finals and all the like calculus 3 and number theory and all these things. And so I go to my professors, and I had never told them who I was because I didn't want the professors to think that I was some, jazz musician.
Yeah.
So I always used my Eduardo in the file, and they didn't put two and two together.
Interesting.
And because most people in Miami couldn't say Eduardo when I first got here, so they called me Ed, or Psst, oh yeah, But so I said to them, can I take the finals early because I have to go to New York and record? And that's when they put two and two together and said, I said, yeah. So I go up to New York and I do this recording. This is a true story. I mean, this is ridiculous. And talking about the hand of God. In 1981 or 2, I was playing with a concert jazz band, the University of Miami Concert Jazz Band, warming up against the wall in West Palm Beach, and Chick Corea was on the stage playing. I'm playing against the wall, I'm warming up, and I feel this wind behind me. And I turn around, and there's Dizzy Gillespie, his face like this.
Beautiful.
And he says, what's your name? Kid, you sound great. Shakes my hand, walks away. I don't see Dizzy Gillespie ever again until I go to record Flight to Freedom.
Oh, was that amazing?
We're recording Flight to Freedom. Little do I know that Dizzy is to Arturo what Mike Brecker is to me.
Oh, is that beautiful?
Right? I mean, the stories are unbelievable. Yeah. He's got Dizzy's trumpet in his house.
Oh, my Lord.
I'm at Arturo's house when Rafael Mendez. He has Rafael Mendez actually trumpet, who his children sent to Arturo. I was at the house when he got it.
Unbelievable.
So in the cabinet, there's Dizzy's trumpet, and there's Arturo's trumpet, and there's. So I'm in this room, and there's Dave Weckl, and Chick Corea, and my solos on the speaker coming out, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing there. And in walks Dizzy Gillespie.
Oh my Lord.
And what else would I be doing but eating a salad? So I'm standing up eating a salad, and in walks Dizzy, hugs Arturo, says hi to everybody, makes a beeline to me, and he's listening and he's smiling, and he grabs and he takes an olive off my salad. And he goes, "You're the kid against the wall."
Oh, was that funny?
Like,
he remembered.
You remember. He's like, "You still sound great, kid." So now I don't know what to do
Yeah.
because Weckl is like, you know, I was really excited you were going to be on this record, and I had never met him, and you know, he's like one of my heroes. And Chick Corea says to me, he says, when I first walked into the studio, Chick comes in, and he's got a little briefcase, and he walks up and he says, "Hi, I'm Chick Corea." I'm like, "Yeah, I know," and I'm shaking, you know. He says, "Hey, would you do me a favor? Would you come down and read something with me? You have your flute. Would you come read something with me?" Go to a piano, and I pick out my flute, and he passes out this music. And so I'm playing with Chick. I'm playing this song, and I don't know. I play it, and it's beautiful. And I said to him, he says, "Boy, you really read well." I'm saying, "That's my job." I said, "Hey, can I ask you something?" I said, "This sounds a lot like the stuff from Three Quartets, the record he made with Brecker."
Sure.
He said, "Yeah, this was the fourth
Eddie
quartet."
Gomez and Gad.
Eddie Gomez and Gad.
Yeah.
That was my introduction to Chick Corea.
Oh my Lord.
Now we're doing the recording session, and Chick says to me, he says, "Come with me for a minute. Talk about," and literally, at that, now when I get chills because I realize it really is the hand of God. And for those of you that, you know, whatever you believe in, whatever, it's fine. But for me, it's that. You know, Chick's a little smaller than I am, and he has a much better diet. And he puts his hand on my shoulder. He says, "Walk with me in the studio." So there's a control room, and we're walking in the studio. And he said, does this, and he walks with me, and he says, "So they tell me you're studying math, and you might go build bombs or something like that.
Yeah.
You're studying math." I'm like, "Yes, sir." And he squeezes my shoulder, and he says, "Well, do us all a favor." He said, "Very few people on the earth play the saxophone like you do, so do us all a favor and play the saxophone." Squeezes my shoulder and walks away.
Oh, is that fantastic?
That was somebody was sending me a message.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
how do you pay that back? How do you say to Chick, because he's not going to remember those things, or if he does remember, he did it out of this unbelievable kindness, but how do you say thank you for that?
But, you know, I don't think you pay it back, which is interesting, and I think you pay it forward.
You pay it forward, right?
And I think that's what you're doing in being a professor and teaching the way you're teaching and still playing great music and still inspiring people. And you're still at the cutting edge of your playing.
I'm working at it really hard because I have all these other things that I want to do. But you're right about paying it forward.
It's paying it forward. And I think what you're doing, which is so great, is that you are being so honest with the music. Whether we want to call this a gift or a talent or how much hard work you put into it, whatever we analyze this as, the bottom line is you've got it and you're there. And the responsibility that comes with it is really huge.
As unhappy as I am with my playing all the time, there's still a level of expectation that you live up to.
Yeah.
One of the things I think that I'm the most thankful for is that I've been able to open the door for a lot of young people, and they really open it for themselves. But I've been there and been their biggest cheerleader. But whether it's a Lee Levin or a Dan Warner or a Doug Emery or
great young players,
the younger guys, they're probably 10 years younger than me, but I think of them as my children.
Yeah.
And I tell them that. And before Dan Warner passed away, you know, we would always, and here's two big guys who looked a little bit alike, and we would always hug, and we'd always say, "I love you."
Yeah.
You know, that's the kind of relationship that I have with these people. But it's a love not only out of respect, but it's a love out of just the sheer joy that I have to see these young people doing that. And I have students now. I have one student who came to me who wanted to play the saxophone. He wanted to be in the Army Reserve Band, and he couldn't read music. He not a great player at the time, and he said, "Can I do this?" I said, "Yes, you can." A year and a half later, he was the first chair in the
Beautiful.
Army Reserve Band. Those are the things that are really important, like what Charles Foster and Whit Seidner have done for me, what
Right.
Peter has done for me.
Right.
Because Peter has put me in situations that are almost impossible, you know, where I have to play Mike Brecker's book in the Jocko Band, or to do things where he asked me to read things or transpose or play in 200 different styles of music, or play with Sinatra live and, you know, have Sinatra sneak up behind you. Here he got his book, and we've got all these instruments because, you know, we got to play all the doubles, and Sinatra sneaks up behind us. I got Billy Ross on my left, who's one of the greatest saxophone players on the planet.
Yeah.
Gary Keller, Mike Brignola, Gary Lindsay, and Sinatra sneaks up behind us at the show, and he's like, "So," with that voice, and all of us jumped about 14 feet. I almost lost my cookies. And then he comes in front of us and he says, "Hey, who's your favorite arranger in the book?" Like a quiz.
Yeah.
What if I say the wrong thing?
Yeah.
So they go, and I said Don Costa.
Yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, I loved him. He was my favorite too."
Yeah.
I got to record with Vic Damone. Did a bunch of albums with him, with the great Bebu Silvetti was a producer, and Vic allowed me to play a lot of solos on his records, and he was Sinatra's favorite singer.
Yeah.
So Vic Damone invites me to his birthday party. Everybody there is a little older than I am. My wife and I are at the table.
I'm sure a lot older than you were.
Yeah, yeah, I was pretty young at the time, and sitting around the table, and Vic Damone says to me, he says, did I ever tell you the Frank Sinatra story? He says, you know how I met Sinatra? I'm like, no. Because we were talking about great arrangers, and I said the thing about Don Costa. He said, I have to tell you. So he said, I'm singing in New York at the radio station, live. He said, we would sing if the Yankees got rained out. They never get rained out.
Yeah.
One night it gets rained out. So he sings. And Sinatra is playing cards with Don Costa and all his friends. And somebody says to Sinatra, and this is the story that Vic Damone told me, somebody says, hey, is that you? And Sinatra goes, how is that me? He says, it's live radio. So Sinatra stands up, gets the phone, and calls NBC Radio. And Mr. Damone, there's a phone call for you. Oh, okay. Is this Vic Damone? Yes. Oh, no, who is this? This is Vic Damone. Said, who's this? This is Frank Sinatra. Vic Damone says, yeah, right. He hangs up. Does it 3 times. He says, a couple days later, I have to go do a television station. And this is Vic Damone telling me the story, who's like the voice. You talk about playing the saxophone. I'd like to play the saxophone like he sings.
The way he sang.
Or Sinatra. And that's been my good fortune, is that I've been around all the greatest singers on the planet.
Yeah.
And so I try to steal everything I can from him. The little vibrato, the little phrase, the little, that kind of thing, and trying to pass it on to the... So he says, I walk into this place, and there's the blue eyes staring at me, and I get this. So I thought I was dead. So I go over, and Sinatra says to Vic Damone, he says, you hung up on me 3 times. I said, I'm sorry, who would expect Frank Sinatra to call? He said, all I wanted to tell you was that you're my favorite singer. And I'm getting this story from him, and in fact, Vic Damone was probably the only living person to play Sinatra's actual charts while Sinatra was alive. Sinatra actually gave him charts, which he protected. To one time, Billy Ross was taking a picture of the audience, and one of the security guys came up and grabbed Billy, who weighs all of about 90 pounds, grabbed him, and he went, "Are you taking a picture of the music?" No, I was taking it. And they took the camera. Oh, this was back when we had film. But that's how protective they were of that book.
Yeah.
My life is and continues to be that kind of thing where people call you to play on their record. There is no greater honor than that.
But you do this so well because you prove yourself consistently each time.
You have to.
You do. Not everybody does. Yes, your personal constitution is you have to, and you succeeded it. What's interesting is the fact that with all these stories that you have and these names that you have, that's part of what we do with these interviews. All these names that you've mentioned, I want these people to pause, to freeze the frame and go do the research and type in Don Costa and get to know who Don Costa was and do the research and the homework, because he was a brilliant arranger in what he did, and all those arrangements through Sinatra's years.
They're magnificent.
Really magnificent. And they might not know the name Don Costa, but somebody wants to get involved with arranging or composing. You got to do the research. So that's a part of what this is here.
You know what it's like to play if you're the first tenor player, you're playing the second clarinet part maybe, or the first clarinet part of a Don Costa chart, and that's a melody all by itself. Like if you played it by itself, it's a beautiful. It's a masterpiece. It's art. It's artwork. And in the same book, you've got Quincy Jones charts written by hand while he was sitting on the bus with. Right. I mean. Yes, people need to have that experience. They need to know those things.
And they need to do the homework. They need to do it. That's part of what this is, to capture these stories. Yeah. In closing, Ed, what I want you to say is that, we've got these young kids out there. We talk about paying it forward. We've got these young kids out there that are inspired to play an instrument. They're inspired to be involved with the music industry somehow. And they've got a passion. It might not be totally directed or focused yet. What advice would you give them that could guide them along the way to seek out their personal satisfaction and success in what they feel they want to do?
There's a lot of opportunity today. The world is different than it was when I grew up. We don't have the nightclubs where you could play 6 nights a week. Right. But you have video cameras that cost nothing. You have studios that cost nothing. You have YouTube. The key, I think, for all of us is the passion, the love for music, and the commitment to excellence. That thing that Martina Navratilova has, that Dan Marino has, that Don Shula has, that all the great people, Michael Jordan. Right. That commitment to excellence comes with a responsibility that your focus is to make the music and the people that you're making music with better, to support them in that. I think a lot of times we take it as an egocentric thing where we're trying to show. You don't have to show anything, because if you do your part, it will shine on its own. It'll shine more than that. But for the young people today, we've got 7 billion people on the planet.
Yeah.
They all love music.
Yeah.
We can reach them today in ways that Charlie Parker could not.
Right.
And so I don't think that it's a dark time in music. I think it's a very good time in music. It might be the best time we've ever had in music. It's just that instead of raining a large advance check, now it's going to rain pennies from a lot of different places and streams. The new generation is in good hands. The one danger always is that we stop revering excellence, and that we stop celebrating the genius of those people who came before us and provided us the opportunity to make music, because without Philip Bailey or Don Myrick or Bach or Beethoven or whoever came before us, Karen Carpenter or Barbra Streisand, I hear Streisand sing a phrase and I hear her go get a note, and man, I'm in awe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not just her. I got with Patty Austin, got to play with Patty Austin and James Ingram. These are two people who I listen to every night to try to get. Steve Winwood knocked on my door one night while we were out on tour with Tito Puente and Arturo and Winwood. He knocks on my door and he says, "Hey Ed," I open the door, there's Steve Winwood. I literally wore out the CD. How do you do that? Right, of Higher Love. He knocks on my door and says, "Hey, you know that F minor thing?" He said, "What were you playing on that?" That's when you realize that you're nobody.
Yeah.
Because here's a guy who lives in a Roman castle outside of London, who's had a hit in every decade, and who is a genius in every respect, and plays the organ and the guitar and sings still in the original keys.
Yeah.
And he's asking me? If the young people realize that those people are still pushing forward and learning and getting better, and what are the rest of us have to do?
Yeah.
And if you never lose that respect and passion for the music, the world will be a much better place. And they have 7 billion people that Coltrane couldn't reach before.
Absolutely.
First of all, there weren't that many of them, and they didn't have internet. You know? And God bless Coltrane. It's a religious experience when you hear that. And Charlie Parker, and Stan Getz, and Sonny Stitt, and Sonny Rollins. And, you know, it almost makes you cry when you think about what those people mean to you.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who I don't mention. You know, Juan Luis Guerra, we made a record here that won I don't know how many Grammys. He came in with a briefcase, did it in an hour, left. He comes to play a concert. It's a sold-out American Airlines arena, the biggest crowd they've ever had. I get a phone call on Monday, "Would you come be my guest on the concert?" I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to go pick up some apples or something. I show up, and it's Juanes and myself. I walk out. What do you say?
Yeah.
And there's a musical genius, and a great poet, and a guy who said to me, I went to Berkeley, and when I heard all those guitar players, I realized that what I did well was write songs. Yeah. The guy's a great musician, great composer, great guitar player, and he's that humble. I'm like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I better go home and practice some more. It's a very fortunate thing, and you know, I'm thankful for getting the opportunity to spend time with you, and I'm the most thankful for this space is very special for me because you learn so many things here from the engineers, from the assistants, from the musicians. You're dealing with the cream of the crop of the legends of music, and they're passing stuff on to you all the time.
Absolutely.
And if you're paying attention, I might learn something, and I certainly have from all of them. I'm forever indebted to each and every one of them, and I hope that they understand that I will always do my best to make their vision come to life, because it's never about me, it's about the music and what they're doing, and I'm lucky to be along for the ride.
What's amazing is, said so well, as the commitment, the passion, the humility, the dedication, the perseverance you have, the real soulful humanity that you share in who you are. This is what makes the magic of who you are, Ed. And for that, we are so thankful. Thank you so much for the Sessions panel. You have done fantastic.
God bless you. God bless everybody. And thank you for listening. And thank you for letting me be a part of your life.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Dom Famularo here at the Sessions panel. This is so exciting. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Click the subscribe button to be a part of what we're doing. The views help us tremendously. All of your comments, we read them and react to them. This is incredible. The support you're giving us is great. The Sessions panel. We'll see you real soon.